And to me personally, okay, like here's my thoughts. Like if you're gonna do a review on Goodreads, I want your review to be something that is going to help people understand if they are going to enjoy reading the book. But I do have a little surprise for y'all. Now that we've come to the end of this journey, I would like to look at some 1-star reviews of Spare, because I spent so much of my time actually trying to give an honest review of this book, actually trying to engage with what the book actually says. Let's see if the 1-star reviews did the work to actually unpack this book. Now listen, if you didn't like Spare, I'm not saying that it's wrong to give it a 1-star review. I'm not saying that these people don't have the right to dislike the book for whatever reason they want, or to give the review whatever rating that they want to give it. But I do just want to read out some of these 1-star reviews, because a lot of them just don't seem to be based in what the book is actually saying, and don't actually back up their review with anything that is actually connected to the book. This first review here is like an absolute essay. I tried reacting to it in another thing and then my camera died. There are some clips of me reacting to it here. I'm just curious where are these 1-star reviews gonna go? And is it going to start to veer off into sort of conspiracy territory? Unlike Harry, I deliberately tried to moderate what I have to say, which is incredibly challenging when reviewing this memoir. It is also especially challenging but important to keep your review concentrated on what is actually written in this book, including its publicity. Wait, those are actually totally contradicting things you just said. We should concentrate on what is actually written in this book, including the publicity of the book. Wait, those are contradictory statements. Okay. However, my dislike of this fictional story goes much deeper and is more fundamental and gets to the heart of someone's character, their motives and principles or lack of. Now you can see why I struggled with this so much, yet much of my own personal views will remain private. What? Lady, you are on goodreads.com writing a review of the book Spare. How can you keep your own personal views private? That's the point of a Goodreads review, is to actually tell us what you think of the book. So why are you giving me all this song and dance about how you're gonna like keep your own thoughts private? What are you talking about? Whose safety do you really care about? The second issue I have is that Harry left the UK to allegedly keep his family safe. I say allegedly because the narrative keeps changing. Even after reading the book, I am still unclear what the current version of events are and what his story is today. At what point will he be, or was he telling the truth? What? You read the whole book and you're still unclear about why Harry left the UK? Did you read the book? Like, okay, in the book, do you remember the part where he was talking about how there were credible threats to him and his wife? Did you forget that part? There were actual like terrorist threats. So he felt unsafe. Did we read the same book? Let's go to some 1-star reviews that aren't like huge essays, okay? All right, 1 star. If this had been fiction, I might have given it 4 stars. It's actually very well written and it reads almost like a villain's origin story, which is always interesting. But since this is a memoir, I got annoyed by how bratty Harry is throughout it. He complains about everything and uses his oh-so-tragic upbringing as excuse to be horrid. It keeps using the spare as a crutch, as though being the spare should entitle him to something because life had handed him such a bad fate. At one point, he even complains that he's only third to the throne.
If I didn't hate him before, I would now. The amount of entitlement in this book is so vile that I could not stomach to finish it. All right, let's unpack some of that, okay? One, so this reviewer says that the book is actually very well written. I'm not gonna tell people how they should do their stars in their review, but if you're reviewing a book, I feel like part of what you're reviewing in the book and how you should give stars should be related to everything that you would review a book for, which includes the writing and the structure of the book. So if this person is saying that they think the book is actually really well written, then I don't really understand the 1-star review. I feel like they're just giving it the 1 star because they don't like Harry. They even admit in the last part, which insinuates that they hated Harry before they read this book, so that's not a great way to go into it. But saying that you were going to give this book 4 stars because of how well written it was, and then to knock it down to 1 star because you don't like Harry is kind of a weird choice. Again, that's totally their right, but it's not very helpful in terms of reviewing a book. The other thing is they're claiming a lot of things about how Harry comes across in the book, and they just don't match my interpretation at all. I'm not saying that they have to read it in the same way that I do, but this idea that Harry comes across as bratty throughout the book, I don't understand which part of the book they're talking about where he seems to come across as bratty and complaining about everything. I mean, there's a lot of complaints in the book, but I wouldn't say that Harry is complaining about everything. I think there's a lot of actually fun and positive things in the book. And this idea that he uses his oh-so-tragic upbringing as excuse to be horrid. As an excuse to be horrid in what situation? Where was the part where Harry was horrid? I'm not saying that Harry hasn't done anything wrong, but I just don't understand where's the part where he was using being the spare as an excuse to be bad to somebody or to do wrong. I don't know where that comes up in the book. Also, this idea that he complained that he's only 3rd in line to the throne. Harry does mention that he was 3rd in line to the throne, but I don't think he mentions it as a complaint. I don't think he's complaining that he's not higher up in the hierarchy. The only time that Harry ever mentioned himself in the line of succession is just to understand and unpack the hierarchy of the royal family and why he was deprioritized in the family. And as he slowly went down that hierarchy, he was more and more denigrated and more treated as spare, as his reputation could be more and more sacrificed for the good of everybody else. So again, I just think that that's just a woeful misreading of the book. Next review. Royal family gossip is not really of any importance, so here are the parts of the book which actually matter. And I don't consider these spoilers because they have been all over the news. 1, Harry reveals he murdered 25 people in Afghanistan. 2, he compares murdering people to playing video games. 3, the victims were just chess pieces instead of actual people. Now, these 3 things are taken, again, wildly out of context. Harry did not say that these victims were just chess pieces on the board. He was saying that is how the military dehumanizes these people so that they can carry out military operations. He's actually critiquing that dehumanization in the book. The same thing with the comparing murdering people to a video game. He didn't compare the murder to a video game. The military kind of makes this idea of killing enemy combatants into a game. They are encouraging that dehumanization and trying to play it out as if it's just a game. He talks about how they would review the footage and talk about what good and bad things they did during these missions and stuff like that. So again, that's a critique of the military. You can critique the military. Harry's willing to critique how the military dehumanizes people, but that's not a critique for Harry, I don't think. It's pretty clear from the context that he is not glorifying any of these bits. Some have defended Harry by saying, at least it's good that he owns up to it, and he seems to have learned from it. I, however, strongly disagree. Here are just a couple reasons why. Harry implies he was only doing what he was told. Not only is this a hideously bad excuse, it's also one that less privileged people wouldn't be allowed to get away with. Well, I mean, if you work for the military, that is an excuse because the military is about killing enemy combatants. If you don't like that, if you want to critique the military, that's fine. But he was doing his job. That is what the military is for. If you're upset that Harry was in the military and you think that the military is bad, okay, that's fine. That is a criticism. But like, the reviewer is painting it as if Harry is at like the Nuremberg trial and is saying like he was only following orders. Like that's not what's happening here. He says the otherization of Muslims was part of military education. While without a doubt true, this is also another convenient way to downplay personal responsibility. He's trying to take personal responsibility for having this blood on his hands. And then the reviewer is turning it back on him and saying, you should take more personal responsibility. It's like they just did not actually read what Harry was saying in these moments. And saying that he partook in the military's otherization of Muslims in his military education and then grew away from that and is willing to critique that now, I don't think it's showing a lack of personal responsibility. I think he's recognizing that he played a part in that and wants to make amends for that. That's how the book reads to me. I think that he's trying to take personal responsibility for the role that he played in the military while also critiquing the military, which I don't think is strange. The rest of the book is basically Harry implying he's somehow now better than the rest of the cruel, racist, corrupt, criminal, bloodthirsty royal institution he used to be a part of, and in reality still is. I will agree that Harry is still in reality a part of the royal institution because that is how the royal family works. He can't get rid of the fact that he was born into this family, so he is technically still a part of it. But I wouldn't say that Harry is claiming that he's better than the rest of the family. One, he shows them as human beings and they have flaws and they've made mistakes. But I don't think he's saying that he's better than them. He's also made mistakes. He is also a flawed person. I don't think the book comes across as him saying that he's better than all of them. And two, I just don't even know what this comment has to do with the first three comments. This reviewer said that he disagrees with the idea that Harry owns up to killing 25 people in Afghanistan by saying that Harry just seems to be acting better than the rest of his family. Like, that's a non sequitur. What are you talking about? Those two things don't have anything to do with each other. What makes memoirs enjoyable is when the subject is truly willing to accept their own wrongdoings and take responsibility. Harry clearly is not, nor will he ever face the consequences of his actions. I'm guessing they're still talking about the military side of things here. What consequences does he have to face for being a soldier in Iraq? He's not a war criminal. He was doing his job, so I don't understand what consequences do you want to come from soldiers that kill enemy combatants? Again, if you want to critique the military, that's fine, but I just don't understand this idea of Harry's never going to face consequences for his actions in the military. He didn't break the Geneva Convention. Like, I just don't understand. What are you wanting? Hence, this book shouldn't have been written at all. In its current state, it's nothing but yet another slap in the face to those others to whom he, the royals, the UK, and the rest of the Western war criminals have caused immense pain and suffering with impunity. Again, I agree with all of that. I understand. I agree that, like, Western democracies have war criminals on them and the wars were bad, and I agree with all of that, but I don't know how we get from we made mistakes in Iraq and Afghanistan to therefore Harry shouldn't have written this book at all. He includes an edit. Just to drive my point across, I'd like to share a particularly horrible section from the book. This is from part 2, again talking about his military experiences. Do I have to pull up the book because he's sneakily cut out some parts here. Right before this quote that the person plucked out of context, right before it, he said, I asked myself if I was callous, perhaps desensitized. I asked myself if my non-reaction was connected to a long-standing ambivalence towards death. I didn't think so. It was really just simple maths. Note that he says, I didn't think so, and then goes into this whole bit. This is how he thought at the time. It's hard to explain, but like in a memoir, you need to include your thoughts at the time and reflection. So in this part of the book, Harry is talking about his thought process at the time, but he's not saying that this is still how he thinks or this is still what he believes. And other parts of the book show that he doesn't really believe this. He's actually trying to question if he has become desensitized. And at the time, he didn't think he was becoming desensitized to this idea of killing people. But in hindsight, it's pretty clear that he understands that's what was going on. Okay, a few comments on this. It's 2023 and he is still trying to paint the invasion of Afghanistan as somehow moral and justified. Firstly, no. Like, this is one part of the book. He's commenting on they've been trained to take out these people because they've been conditioned to believe that if they don't remove these terrorists, then more British people are going to die. More British soldiers are going to die. That's military conditioning, and you can complain about that, but I don't think Harry is saying that he still agrees with this justification in 2023. And in fact, later on in the book, he's pretty clear that he feels like overall these wars were not justified and that they were actually creating more terrorists through this line of thinking. Because when they killed more of these insurgents, there would be more terrorists there to take their place. And he recognizes that. He talks about that in the book. So this one part here does not show Harry's entire understanding of whether or not the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were justified. Notice how he uses the words take and remove instead of kill or murder when describing his own actions. Contrastingly, he has no problem referring to the people he shot as killers. Again, this is one part of the book. He talks about killing these people. He takes personal responsibility and uses the word kill in other parts of the book. Here, he's describing the military conditioning. That's his thought process in the moment based on what the military has trained him to think. That he needs to take these people out, remove these people, otherwise there's consequences for other British service members. A charming fellow. Listen, I can't get into Harry's head and know how much compassion and understanding that Harry has for the Taliban insurgents, okay? Like I said, anybody can have whatever review they want to have of the book, but the fact that the review is not actually engaging with the totality of the book and how Harry changes throughout the book is just very frustrating. It just speaks to somebody who is looking at one very narrow part of the book, maybe not even read the whole book, using that to come to conclusions about what Harry's mind state is now. Poorly written. The most florid prose I've read since I went through a bodice ripper phase when I was 12. Okay, that's fine. You don't have to like the prose of the book. I personally liked it, but at least that's like engaging with something related to the book. I finished it, but I was left feeling like I'd wasted my money and my time. I wanted to believe Harry, but the more I read, the less I trusted him. There were some things I'm proficient in that have nothing to do with royalty that Harry just flat out lied about. After that, I wasn't sure if I could believe him about anything. Now, it's interesting that this reviewer doesn't actually say, what is the thing that you're proficient in that Harry lied about? Why don't you actually provide evidence of that? But it's just thrown out there, no explanation. Oh, we got another long one. Great. Next review. I can't abide people who think they're blameless. This whole book is all poor Harry. He doesn't blame himself for anything. He's been spoiled. Okay, back up. He doesn't blame himself for anything is just like patently untrue in the book. Like he definitely takes accountability for mistakes that he's made. He doesn't blame himself. I mean, blame is kind of like a bad word, I would say. But he accepts responsibility for things that he's done that are wrong, like the Nazi uniform incident, for example. He gives context for that incident, but he's also taking accountability for it and saying, I fucked up and I made that mistake. There's lots of times where he feels like he's made mistakes and he takes accountability for them. So I just feel like that's just painting a broad brush of something that's not in the book. He's been spoilt as a child and spoilt as an adult, moaning when Charles cut him off and wondering how they would manage, yet he still lives in a big house. Oh, poor, poor Harry. Charles cutting Harry off is financial abuse, right? Charles had complete control over Harry's finances and then stripped them away. And his father didn't prepare him at all for being a regular person with no job outside of the royal family. So again, to be like, oh, poor, poor Harry, he's so spoiled. Again, it's just a total misunderstanding of what Harry is saying. I was controlled financially by the institution and not allowed to grow as an independent person. And then I'm having that thrown back in my face when I was never allowed to assert any independence in my life, which is exactly what this commenter is doing now. As everyone knows, Harry lost his mother when he was young, yet so did his brother William. It is quite clear throughout Harry's storytelling that William cares about him a great deal and is worried about him and wanting to get him help. William can obviously see he is going the same way as his mother did. Paranoid. All right, so this whole idea Diana and Harry are paranoid. They are not paranoid if the things that they are saying or happening are true and there's evidence to show that these things are true, right? Like, they're not paranoid about the royal family being in cahoots with the press when they know for a fact that that's real. When they know for a fact that these people are leaking and briefing against each other. They have direct communication with these comms teams. They know that this is happening, so to say that it's paranoia is just, it's just not true. 2, Harry does acknowledge that William also lost his mother. He doesn't like berate William or say that he doesn't have a right to grieve over Diana's death or anything. He's just kind of sad that they weren't able to like bond together over it. There was so much hurt and trauma there that they really couldn't talk about that and process their mother's death together. But I think he understands William was having a difficult time too. There's nothing in the book claiming that that wasn't the case. And this idea that William cares about him a great deal and is worried about him and wanting to get him help. William can care about Harry a great deal, but that doesn't mean that the care that he's showing is actually helpful or healthy. Like, William in the book tells Harry that he's being brainwashed by his therapist. Clearly, when Harry is getting help and trying to help his mental health, William doesn't actually believe that that help is good for him. He just believes that he's being brainwashed. He's being turned against the family, which is like cult behavior, right? He cares about him, but only if Harry thinks and does exactly what he wants him to do. And that's controlling and abusive. The book does not have a male voice. Oh my God. Oh no. Oh no, now we're in conspiracy. The book does not have a male voice. It reads like a woman wrote it. I don't know what that means. I just don't know what that means. Okay. I feel like it's planting the seeds of a conspiracy that this is like ghost written by Meghan or something. Very flowery prose that had me laughing out loud a lot, but mostly cringing. Harry is clearly besotted with Meghan, but he thinks everyone else should be too, so woe betide anyone who isn't. Namely the British press, William and Kate. I don't think Harry is saying that everybody has to love Meghan, but there's a difference between these people don't like her and they're actively creating a hate campaign against her. One of the pieces of advice that I got to tell kids in the teaching profession is you don't have to like everybody, but you gotta respect everybody. William and Kate, the British press, they don't have to like Meghan. They don't have to be friends with her, but they have to treat her with respect. And that's the argument that Harry is making, is that at the end of the day, Meghan wasn't being treated with respect. She was actually being racially abused and harassed. At first, Charles loved Meghan, but when he found out she was giving up her job and he'd have to pay for her, it seems in Harry's eyes he went off her. Okay, the timeline of that doesn't even fit the book at all. Charles loved Meghan at first until he found out she was going to give up her job. In the context, so Charles asks if Meghan is going to give up her job. Harry is going to ask Meghan to marry him. So how could Meghan have a job if she's going to be part of the royal family? The royal family clearly doesn't want people having jobs while they're working in the firm. So this idea of like Meghan was giving up her job and just assuming that the family was going to pay for everything, like that wasn't happening. This idea that Charles was retaliating at this idea of Meghan giving up her job. So then he went to Harry and was like, well, I'm not paying for her. Like that's not the vibe that we get from the conversation in the book. And also the timeline still doesn't match up because there's other scenes after that scene in the book that show that Charles and Meghan have a good relationship on a one-to-one personal level. This doesn't even reflect what's in the book, which makes me think that this person didn't read the book. The Queen loved Meghan instantly, and it was even she who suggested Meghan write the famous letter to her father. Yeah, that was a problem, right? Wait. They told her to write this letter and then didn't support her when the media illegally published the contents of that letter. So I don't even know what this sentence is trying to say. Oh, that was so nice of them to tell Meghan to write this letter and then not back her up when the media stole it? The British press left Meghan sobbing and suicidal. She's always sobbing. What? She's always sobbing? Harry stated, I'll get you help, but first I need to go to this function this evening, but you stay here. No, cried Meghan, I'll go with you. Okay, this person didn't read the book. Can we read that scene? That's just a lie. Yeah, this whole thing is a lie, okay? This is the passage. I begged her not to talk like that. I promised her we'd get through it. We'd find a way. In the meantime, we'd find her the help she needed. I asked her to be strong, hang on. Incredibly, while reassuring her and hugging her, I couldn't entirely stop thinking like a fucking royal. We had a Sentebale engagement that night at the Royal Albert Hall, and I kept telling myself, we can't be late. We cannot be late. They'll skin us alive, and they'll blame her. Slowly, too slowly, I realized that tardiness was the least of our problems. I said she should skip the engagement, of course. I needed to go, make a quick appearance, but I'd be home fast. No, she insisted, she didn't trust herself to be at home alone for even an hour with such dark feelings. So we put on our best kit and she applied dark lipstick to draw attention away from her bloodshot eyes, and out of the door we went. These things are in quotes, but this isn't actually the exchange that they had. This idea that Meghan was like, no, I'll go, is not actually painting a picture of the exchange that they had. Harry was like, okay, I need to go, but like, you can stay here if you want. And she says, no, I don't want to be alone because I'm afraid of my dark suicidal thoughts catching up to me, and I don't want to be at home alone. Like, it's just a totally different exchange. There is then no further mention of her suicidal tendencies or no mention of getting her help. Well, okay, there's a few things here. One, this isn't Meghan's story. This is not Meghan's memoir. So Harry doesn't go into the intricacies of all the struggles that Meghan had trying to get mental health support from the royal family and all of her suicidal thoughts and stuff. It's not her story, right? This isn't her book. So just because there's no more mention of it in the book doesn't mean that it didn't happen. Harry himself, though, has a therapist and turns to her a lot. At the end of the book, he thanks a whole host of therapists, so not sure why he didn't get one of them to help Meghan. Oh my god, as if Meghan didn't... I just don't even know what this comment is insinuating. Like that Harry didn't actually get Meghan mental health support? That they didn't try to get Meghan mental health support? There's also like a big difference here, okay? Talking to a therapist and just getting a therapist for like regular stuff and having a wife that's literally like having suicidal ideation and is so concerned about her suicidal thoughts that she doesn't want to be alone. Those are like two completely different things. They couldn't get her the support that she really would have needed in that moment, which would be to like be checked into a psychiatric facility. The implication of this is just that Meghan's mental health problems were just all a sham or all a lie. It's just not based in reality or what's in the book. And also this idea that there's no further mention of her suicidal tendencies. Sure, there's no more mention of the suicidal ideation part of it, but there's other parts parts of the book that talk about Meghan's mental health difficulties with dealing with the situation outside of suicidal ideation. So it's insinuating stuff that's not true. There is a distinct lack of Meghan's opinions throughout the book, so I can only assume she's writing one next and will get her side of the boring story. I can hardly wait. Okay, what does that have to do with this review? How is this part of the review of the book? There's a distinct lack of Meghan's opinions. It's Harry's memoir. Harry's on the front cover. Yeah, there's a distinct lack of Meghan's thoughts in the book because it's not her book. You're right. Okay, if you think that's worth 1 star, sure. It left me feeling very sorry for William and Kate. Harry has a lot of digs at both of them. I expect they just had to wash their hands of him in the end, as William tried as many times to help him, but Harry sees it a different way. It's not help if you're not listening to what the person actually wants. It's not help if you're like, let me help you by telling you that you have to divorce your wife, leave her, shut the fuck up, deal with abuse from the press, and make me look good. That's not really help. If William's idea of help is just Harry should go back to accepting his fate as the spare in the family. Harry admits to taking drugs and still smokes weed. I think it's addled his brain. He clearly can't remember things correctly. I don't know how this reviewer can say that he doesn't remember things correctly in his own life. He writes of the Queen as if she was on his side and states they had a secret special relationship. Rolls eyes. He writes of the Queen as if she was on his side. She was on his side. Wait, in the parts where he's talking about the Queen being on his side, I'm thinking this is in relation to like the Meghan dramas, right? The Queen was on his side. The Queen did sign off on the idea of him like suing NGN. The Queen did allow him to get married to Meghan. The Queen gave them Frogmore House. Like the Queen clearly did have a relationship with Harry. So like to paint it as like that's a lie, like that they couldn't have really had a relationship, that they didn't really like each other. It's just, how do you know that? How do you, random internet commenter, know anything about that? Even after the Queen died, he believes she appeared as a hummingbird in his home in America. He's clearly away with the fairies. Listen, I said I disliked the stupid hummingbird ending too, okay? But like, that was a metaphor. Like, you can't be fucking mad at a metaphor in a book. Like, I don't think he legitimately, literally thinks that the Queen has reincarnated as a hummingbird. Fucking media literacy. Like, you can read a book and think that, like, the metaphor is stupid or whatever, and not think that Harry is literally delusional and thinks that the Queen is a hummingbird. Hopefully, he has his happy life in America, making money out of his fairy stories, and stays away from the UK for good. So again, there's just a lot of insinuation that like it's all lies and Harry is lying and stuff like that, but no actual like pointing to the text and talking about the book. Like, this is the part that I dislike about some of these reviews, is that it's not a review of the book, it's a review of Harry. This review doesn't talk anything about the structure of the book, the writing of the book. The only thing that talks about the writing of the book is to claim that, quote, the book does not have a male voice. Like some gender essentialist nonsense. Like, what? What does it mean to have a male voice in your book? To me, it has a pretty manly voice. There's a whole section of the book that takes place in active combat in Iraq. I don't know. That seemed pretty masculine to me. But it's just like these reviews are not actually a review of the book. And to me personally, okay, like here's my thoughts. Like, if you're gonna do a review on Goodreads, I want your review to be something that is going to help people understand if they are going to enjoy reading the book. And so I'm not saying that you can't comment on Harry as a narrator or Harry's presentation of his story. I'm not saying that they can't factor that into their review, but when the review is just like, 1 star, Harry's a liar, I think William and Kate are cool, like it's not really engaging with the text. and reviewing the text as a read. It's like, it's just a review of Harry. All right, let's jump in. I purchased this book a few minutes after it was published. I wanted to finish reading it and write a review on the publishing day itself, but it took me around 2 months to finish reading it. After reading the initial pages, I understood what I had to expect from this book. The writing, accusations, and hypocrisy were at an extreme level that it became challenging for me to read it. At least he's talking about the reading itself, okay? Like, you know, starting off all right. Even though it was so tough for me to finish reading it, reviewing it is actually very easy for me, as I can sum up the whole book in just one sentence. That would be highly unethical for me as a healthcare professional to professionally interpret the behavior patterns of human beings who are still alive by a single line in a book review. So I'm abstaining from trying to attempt such an endeavor. If you are someone with common sense and a little knowledge of human behavior, you can easily detect many red flags projecting right at your face throughout this book. This review is like already planting the seeds of like there's something mentally wrong with Harry, which is like not a great sign. Like if you're a mental health care professional, why would you even toy with this idea of like, oh, well, there is something mentally wrong with Harry, but I'm not going to diagnose him. If you want to engage with like talking about Harry's mental health, why don't you talk about like the interview with Gabor Mate, okay? I mean, you can engage with the book with those in mind if you want. I just don't really see where this is factoring into the review. Before saying anything more about this book, we must discuss some things about Harry. He was indeed born into the royal family, which is one of the richest in the world, but that doesn't mean that whatever he mentions regarding his suffering can't be taken seriously just because he was born with a silver spoon. True. In fact, I felt there is some truth regarding the sufferings, not all though, he mentions in this book. He lost his mother and closest friend due to different accidents. Many of his family members seem to treat him as a spare. Those are all pretty difficult things for any teenager to handle within their lives. True. There's a lot of trauma there. Okay, this review at least seems to be engaging with the book, which you know what? Fair enough. 1-star review, but it's actually engaging with the text. I can get behind that. Harry seems to be an empath to a certain extent who had to face many tumultuous experiences. His problems might appear not as severe compared to what some of you have had to go through in your own lives, but if we look at it from Harry's perspective, the journey was indeed a tough one. Now, coming to the book, there were allegations that it was ghostwritten by someone who had written many famous memoirs in the past. Now, it wasn't an allegation. The book is ghostwritten by J.D. Moringer. He wrote a couple celebrity memoirs. There's actually a really great New Yorker piece where he talks about ghostwriting this book and his other ghostwriting experiences and what it means to be a ghostwriter. As Harry has not responded to that, let us assume that Harry himself has written it. This review came out in May 5th. Like, didn't you just Google it? The book was ghostwritten. Why do we have to assume Harry wrote himself? I also heard a rumor that Harry has signed a multi-book deal. If that is true, the first request I have for Harry is to allow another person to write those books who has better skill in articulating with the readers. If the ghostwriting claims are valid, it will be better to find another writer whose writing style suits Harry's story. Okay, you know what? Valid. If you don't like J.D. Moringer's style and you think it conflicts with what Harry's trying to say in here, okay, that's a fair critique of the book. The problem with this book is that there are discrepancies in many things Harry mentions. Accountability is treated as a joke, and Harry tries to blame everyone who opposes him. Some sentences make you ponder the level of hypocrisy involved in them. His addiction to drug and alcohol are described in a wayward manner, just like how he publicly dealt with the same in his real life. I totally disagree with that. Like, Harry talks about his addiction problems. I don't feel like he described it in a wayward manner. I mean, he's trying to balance that, yes, he struggled with drugs and alcohol, and that's a problem, and he acknowledges that that was coming from trauma and trying to cope with pain and stuff like that, while also recognizing that the way that he was reported about his drug use was not to serve him and was just to denigrate his character. So, like, I don't I don't know what they mean. Like, just like how he publicly dealt with the same in his real life, the whole painting of him as this drug-addled teenager was unfair. It was not portrayed sympathetically at all. It was just painted to denigrate him. Even though he seems to be an empath, sometimes he vacillates in his behavior and behaves like someone without empathy, especially during his tirade against his brother William and when he mentions people he killed in the war by denoting them by kill count. So I don't know which tirade against William he's talking about here, because I feel like whenever he talks about William, he does express empathy to what William is thinking of. And I do agree that there can be some critique about how he presents William's mindset because he can't be in William's thoughts. I think that is a fair criticism of the book. This is one that Savvy Writes Books had as well, that sometimes it goes too far into trying to guess what William's mental state was in certain conversations or certain actions that he took. That does go into some dicey territory, but I wouldn't say that when he's talking about William, he lacks empathy. I don't know. And there's no evidence presented in the review of that. And also, again, the idea of like mentioning the kill count and that expresses a lack of empathy. It's just, how many times can I say this? Just read the goddamn book. Like, it's not like he's not expressing any empathy for people that died in this conflict. When there are a lot of serious topics to discuss, he seems to be mainly focusing on his beard and private body parts in some parts of this book, which seemed very strange from a reader's perspective. So the beard is one chapter, and talking about the frostbitten penis was like in a few chapters. But one, the beard wasn't really focused on, and the purpose of the beard story was to talk about how little bodily autonomy he had while in the royal family. He literally has to ask his grandmother whether he can keep his beard or not because his body is being treated like it doesn't belong to him, which is abusive, right? And two, the story about the frostbitten penis was about how he couldn't seek medical attention for this severe problem that he had because of a fear of the press. And that's really sad. Like, he cannot get medical attention without being concerned that it's going to leak to the press and he's going to be denigrated for seeking medical help. Writing a memoir at a young age is perilous, as there should be an adequate number of experiences in their life that make the book interesting to read. Similarly, writing skills are also much more important compared to memoirs of older, well-known people. Okay, I disagree with that second thing there. I do agree that writing a memoir when you're pretty young can be a little bit precarious because sometimes it can come off like you are a little bit green, like you don't have like a full life of experiences to make all of those reflections and stuff. With Harry, I wouldn't say that that's as much of a concern because Harry's childhood in itself contains a lot of questions in it and a lot of themes to grapple with about like consent as a child, being put on public display as a child. Most people's childhoods are not interesting, so like if you're writing a memoir and like the majority is about a childhood that's just not really engaging, doesn't have a lot of themes that are like really interesting to engage with, I can understand why that would come across as a bit a waste of time. But Harry's childhood is so wrapped up in all of these ideas about the press and consenting and child performance and all of that stuff. I think there's enough in there that his childhood itself has enough to make this story interesting. And I think it was also a really good idea of him and J.D. Mooringer to really start the book around Harry at age 12 and not to try and focus too much on being born all the way to 12, because those years in the context of what the book is trying to talk about aren't very interesting. But from 12 to 18, where Harry is still a child, but also has to live within this system, that story does have a lot of interesting questions to grapple with. So I wouldn't say like that he didn't have enough adequate experiences to really get people engaged in that part of the book. But again, that's my opinion. In Harry's case, there were a few things that attracted the attention of the public, which might be one of the main reasons why this book became a success, along with aggressive marketing. But he sadly fails to connect it convincingly with the readers. Okay, that's an opinion. I'm fine with that opinion. I mean, it's not coming from like a weird spin place, at least. If he feels like it didn't connect with him as a reader, like, that's fair. There are certain private things that should remain private within the family. It is the personal discretion of the author whether to reveal them to the public in their memoirs or biographies. But when you are doing it, you should do it convincingly. Just look at the way Harry describes him moving to the US. It will confuse the readers more instead of enlightening them about the reason for the same. To grapple with this, there are certain private things that should remain private within the family. There's kind of a problem with this because I believe that Harry knows a lot more shit about the family than he put in this book, for sure. I'm sure there are plenty more family secrets that Harry didn't divulge in the book. But the problem is those are unknown unknowns, right? So when he says there are certain private things that should remain private within the family, how do we know that those certain things that should remain private haven't been remaining private? Because Harry didn't put them in the book. So yeah, Harry probably also thinks the same thing and didn't divulge everything that he knows about the family in the book, but there are certain things that he thought this shouldn't remain private because this explains my life and who I am. 2, I don't like this idea of like, what are the things that the reviewer is insinuating should have remained private? I wish you would give an example, because if this reviewer, who apparently is a mental health professional, is saying that, for example, William physically attacking his brother should have remained private, I disagree with that really strongly, because that's enabling abusers to continue to abuse people, right? If we know that that action is abusive and Harry told that story, and unfortunately it doesn't look great for William because he was the aggressor in that situation, to say, for example, like that story should have remained private is victim blaming. Like, victims have a right to talk about the abuse that they suffered from other people. Maybe that's not what this reviewer is referring to, but like, again, give an example. Like, what do you think should have remained private that isn't Harry just telling his story and saying what happened? The last part about Harry describing moving to the US and saying it will confuse the readers, I can kind of understand what they mean by it might confuse the readers. If you're not up on all the background knowledge to decode part 3, it can be a little bit of a difficult follow. That's something I said in my review too, that I felt like there was a lot of summary of what happened, but a lot of details and scenes were kind of missing out of the equation, probably because lawyer intervention. But in terms of like Harry explaining the reasons why they moved to the UK, I don't think that's confusing at all. I think he lays out all of the problems that they had with the institution. I think that's pretty well laid out. It's pretty clear. This is one of the most disappointing memoirs I have read if we look from the angle of the writing style or its content. I can't give any rating above 1 star to it. Please note that it is the rating of the book and not the rating of the person, Harry. Well, okay, that's fair. If you think the book, writing-wise or style-wise, is a 1 star, sure, okay? Totally respect your opinion to that. I just wish that this review itself explained a little bit more what the problems were with the book. Hello, editing me here. So my camera died at the very end of this video, and I didn't really have much more to say after this. This was the last one that I was going to do, but I didn't want to go back on camera again and do everything again so that I could like finish up the video. Sorry that this video just kind of ended in a very weird way, but thank you so much for watching. Please go back and watch all the rest of my spare reviews if you haven't seen all of them. There's tons and tons of content there. If you want to get caught up on my Harry and Meghan 3 stories series as well, in preparation for the 3rd installment, which will be about monarchy, specifically the Thai monarchy and the British monarchy, and what we can learn about monarchy in the modern world. Main thing I want to say is thank you so much again for watching. I really hope you liked this. More content coming out, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!